I'm Tracy.
And I'm Alex.
And we're here at Blockhouse Yoga and Wellness Studio with our new friend, Fiona Leckenby. Welcome, Fiona. Thank you for joining us. We are excited to talk to Fiona today and learn a little bit about what she does to help people heal. We have been curious about all the different healing modalities in our area. There are so many wonderful ones. And so we're just trying to have a little regular session once a month or so with a new friend, maybe an old friend. But today, Fiona's great in joining us, even though she hardly knew us. So,
So we want to get to know you, and the whole point behind these lovely informal chats, we were just talking before we hit record about how it's almost as if you're having a conversation with a couple of friends. And we're hoping that both Tracy and I can sort of touch in on some of the questions that people who might be viewing this video may have, because I'm coming at this from a completely, I don't know exactly what you do kind of place. So let's just start with that. Let's just say, give you the floor for a few minutes to just explain what it is, the name and the specifics behind how it works, the mechanisms and how it heals.
Sure. So, so the modality that I use is called Somatic Experiencing, and that's something people can Google. There's a fair amount out there. And it was a modality that was developed at really, it's a body-based modality. And it was developed to help people process trauma in their body. It draws from a lot of wisdom that was there already in nature. The man who developed it is called Peter Levine. So that's, if people want to research a little bit more, they can learn about that. So in my practice, what I do, how I think about what I do is that I support people in connecting to their body's resilience and aliveness. And usually people who identify as having quite a bit of trauma and having gone through quite a bit of trauma. So that's the beginning of, explaining it. But, one of the reasons that it can be really helpful to take a body-based approach to working with trauma is that our brains store trauma in lower areas in our brain, not the sort of higher cortical regions. And these lower places where trauma is stored connect more directly with our body. So what we find, most of us find, if we are talking about an event that was really, really overwhelming, we might be able to talk about that with people. But sometimes it's almost like you can't quite touch it. You can't quite get into it and feel a change. And so when we drop into a more body-based approach, what I've noticed is that people can kind of contact the essence of the trauma and begin to build a relationship, and that can become flexible again. It can become, we can start to relate to that material and have it drive us less and be in a little bit more of a place of choice in our lives.
So when you talk about trauma, are you referring to any particular kind? Like, is it just physical? Is it just emotional? Or what? Can you just maybe explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so trauma, sort of broadly defined, as any event that was just really overwhelming for us at the time. And what's often said is that it's not really held in the event, it's held in our systems after the event. So what's really overwhelming for one person may not be for another. So sort of like one of the features of trauma is, like a pattern that we're really stuck in, an example might be even just being chronically late. and really using our mindset, like, okay, how do I troubleshoot this? But oftentimes these patterns that we butt up against came from events that were pretty big for us. So, but to directly answer, so trauma, I have a very broad range of trauma. I actually think it's important that we sort of say that it's not a thing that some people experience. And, you know, certainly we were talking just before this conversation, you know, we're in times that are pretty overwhelming, right? So, and if we also include, you know, if we include like what's carried down epigenetically, I think it's reasonable to say that we all have trauma on board. And that doesn't have to be a bad thing. I think of it as, I think of trauma as hyper learning. It's like learning that has been written in a deeper form in our bodies. So that's a double-edged sword, but there can be a lot of advantages actually to having experienced these overwhelming events and then come through them. It can actually make us more resilient.
So many questions are flying through my head, but I'm going to try and streamline the two that just hit me based on what you just were saying. First of all, you touched on, I'm going to call it ancestral trauma. So there's that. There's what is ours and what is ancestral, and how do you make the distinction? So we'll put a pin in that one, because this is in my head and I'm going to forget. So those, and we're recording this, so I might go back and we can do part two. Then the second part to that is, can you have trauma and not realize it? And how through this work would you be able to unravel that or uncover that? And then I guess the next question would be, and now it's out of my head, I guess, oh yes, I know what it is. How do you distinguish between trauma and just your run-of-the-mill garden variety stress? That's, and I'm speaking from my own personal stuff, but all of that are questions I have for myself, which I'm hoping is relatable for many people who might be watching this. So anyway, those are my three big questions. Maybe they're linked, maybe they're not, but I just
they're great questions.
We're talking, I'm like, I better get this out while I'm still.
Thank you for, yeah, thanks for those. Such great questions. Yeah, so would you like me to touch on some of those?
Yes, please.
That's why I asked them.
Yes.
So what I'm doing right now, actually something that I'll do during a session, I'm actually dropping into my body a little bit. Because you asked me all those questions and I love this topic, and my brain can really go to some places right now. But why I'm taking this pause is I actually just want to kind of drop in and be coming from a more useful place. So I'm going to do that just for a moment as I look at these questions here.
That's cool. You can show us first.
Yeah, I can even describe, if you like, I can describe the process, because this is something that most of us can do during the day, right? So what I notice, actually, if I start to respond from my mind, it's almost like a center of gravity. And it's like my center of gravity moves up here. And there's, for me, there's almost like a texture to it. It's quite light, very energized. It's great. It's a great place to be. And then, so when I drop into my body, it's almost like I'm just letting that elevator just kind of like go down with gravity. And I notice a difference in what I can contact here. So I'll take one more moment here. And I'm feeling into my bones too. So talking about ancestral trauma, yeah. I think your question was, how do we know what's ours? And what is coming from our lineage? And how I see it, I sort of see it in the body where I see a lot of our ancestral material is I see that as being in our bones. And the view that I hold is that we can't actually be separated from our lineage. So if we were working, let's say during a session, and somebody's really got this sort of curiosity of like, there's things popping up in my life and I just don't know where it's coming from. We might really just, that person might even just drop into their bones and just begin to experience things from that place, right? So I guess the answer to the question from my perspective is that they're not separated. And that the more that we're in relationship to that part of our knowing, over time, we might be able to distinguish, right? Like, oh yeah, this feels like it's connected to a place. Oh, it's a place that's not quite here. That might be if my people came from overseas, right? It's really interesting how the information sort of associates, when we just
It's essential to heal your ancestral, like, I guess what I'm excited about talking to you is that could you be the linchpin that heals that generational trauma?
Right. Yeah.
So you're not doing it for yourself, doing it for everyone behind you.
Yes, I that's how I see things. I see things as nonlinear too, right? So that if we're a connected system and we're not actually, we think we're linear, but we're non-linear, then if we experience more safety, more regulation, more space, more joy, then yeah, I believe that we've provided that to that network, even if that network is no longer with us in this time. So yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah. And then I think with this ancestral and collective piece, the view that I have right now is that a lot of how our wounding is showing up in that area is that we don't talk about it. We sort of live in these sort of an agreement of, oh, we don't talk about things that are uncomfortable, right? So even the act of just kind of verbalizing and witnessing, hey, this is where my people came from, or this is my people's experience. I think even that alone is a really important thing, can be healing in and of itself.
Exciting to be able to let go of that.
Yeah.
I like what you said though, that it's not linear, right? Because if we heal something within our line, we know it's gonna affect those in our family line going forward, but also I think everybody around us, right? Because our energy's all connected. So
Yeah, and I think it can be like a bit more spacious to think about it, even if we're just thinking about our own personal healing journey. I think we've sort of received this idea that there's a crucial thing, and if we can get to that crucial thing, we're going to be healed. And what I think I've observed is that if we get space in one aspect of our story, if we feel a little relief in any aspect of our being, because of the way we're connected to ourselves, this has an impact even on the things we haven't reached yet. Right. So even if there's an issue and there's sort of a core to that issue, even if it feels like you're not working right at that core, I think anything that we do that sort of supports this inner feeling of safety can actually start to unwind some of that from a distance.
Wow. So now I can't even remember the second question. I think
stress and anxiety and
oh yeah. So
stress from trauma.
Yeah. So chronic long-term stress has, you sort of, in terms of how it impacts our bodies, can look a lot like a traumatic event. So yeah, chronic and long-term are the.
Can that become a traumatic event? Does it look like, or does it become, I guess?
It can become. So there's a whole category of trauma that we call complex trauma. And this would be it can even be being in a situation, you can think about being in an employment situation that you cannot get out of for one reason or another. That's really difficult day after day. So that would, over time, with enough not choiciness, I think would be indistinguishable from a one-time event in terms of how we hold it in our systems. So there's like, how I hold it is there's a bit of a threshold, a little bit of stress is actually really healthy for us. It can cause us to relate to each other more because we have to ask for help and get through it. And then we look back and we see we got through it. So life without stress probably wouldn't be that healthy. But yeah, chronic, long-term, not feeling a choice about it, feeling like I'm helpless. No matter what I do, there's going to be a bad consequence. I hold that more toward the traumatic end of things.
So I'm hearing that the stress could be positive as long as it's kept in balance and in check, which might open us up to the idea that along with this kind of treatment and modality that you're offering, supporting it with other stress release modalities such as yoga, such as Pilates, such as the acupuncture with K. Like there's just so many wonderful things that you can bring in to help manage it, so that it's not just I've got trauma and I need to do something with it. That there is a toolbox to access.
Yeah, and I think there's something really, gosh, for our nervous systems, it's always now. So no matter what we experienced, even if we use the work situation I was describing before, right? And then something comes up. So that was, let's say that was traumatic. I was in this, I was stuck there for years and I couldn't get out. And now that's in the past, but we're still kind of still with us. And then imagine that another event comes along that's got some of the same flavor to it in our system. And we start to feel that like, yeah, I'm feeling it. And it's, we often hear the word triggered, but it's connecting to this other traumatic event and then beginning to feel a little out of control here when this next thing comes along that has the same flavor. So what you're describing here, accessing what's available, like going to yoga, looking around, who's in my support group, what choices do I have now? That's medicine for our nervous systems, because we're telling ourselves that this is different now. Yeah, that happened. That was really big. And this feels a little like that. But look at me. I know I'm already going to a yoga class. There's already people there who know me. I'm going to go there no matter how I'm feeling today. So right there, we have a lot of power over our own systems when we just access the support that's there. And there's a couple of things about yoga that can be really, really helpful for people who are carrying a fair amount of trauma in their systems. And one is the group aspect. So when we go into a place and we just see familiar faces, right? Like there's a branch of our nervous system that's the ventral vagal branch of our autonomic nervous system. And it's where we connect socially. And if we put ourselves into a social situation that feels relatively safe, it's a pretty powerful switch for our nervous system, where even if we're experiencing a lot of activation, just going to that place and looking around and seeing familiar faces is really, really powerful.
I'm hearing community, which is what both Trace and I are really big intention for Blockhouse Yoga coming up to a year in September. We really feel like we've built already in 1 year such a nice, safe space, a sanctuary and a community for people. Once you come through that door, just leave whatever's going on the other side of it, find your spot, settle in, know the people that you've been doing yoga with, which is pretty, I think, intimate thing with the group.
Yeah.
Should feel safe and should feel welcoming. And that has always been the forefront of attention. And I feel it when I'm with people, like, yeah, we're at the front the class of leading, but they're coming in and supporting us because I have a place to go, which also is helping me in these crazy times to be able to show up for people, but also it's a integral and interactive exchange.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yeah, and our nervous systems, I mean, a lot of what we've learned about trauma and our nervous systems over the last decades, that's been more focused on individual. But what you're talking about, it's really where the edge of the field is. It's in terms of trauma work, it's understanding that actually our nervous systems are always connected, and that when we're with somebody else who's relatively safe, and if that person is relatively regulated, our systems connect with that and have more space to process. So yeah, that co-regulation is a really great opportunity that you're holding out.
And something that's naturally happening, but for you to recognize it from your modality.
Yeah. Well, is there anything that you would like to share, maybe before we wrap up, anything in particular maybe that you would like to share that maybe people wouldn't understand, or just something that you want people to know about what you do that might be special or unique, or anything you'd like?
Well, the thing I think I'd love to share is that most people are healthier than they think they are.
That's nice.
They're doing better than they think they are, and they have more skills than they think they do.
Or resilience, is that a good word too?
And resilience, yeah, that's in this package for sure. And I think even the example of what you've created there, right? Like you're creating this thing that feels natural, but it's actually pretty special. And so what I noticed is that the people that I work with, and people who've come through an awful lot, they're doing better than they think they are, and so that would be what I'd want to share. I'm available, I've got a web page if people want to check that out. And I've also, in September, a friend and colleague of mine, Sally Hutchinson, we're facilitating a retreat on September 17th, and I'll try to have info about that on my webpage, or I think maybe, would you be able to link in there?
Everything. So if anyone who's watching this, it'll be right in too. So we'll make sure that you know how to access you. And I honestly feel we probably need a part 2 with you. Really, we're just scratching this is a pretty big topic at a very timely place in our lives right now.
Fiona, tell us quickly, where can people find you? Where are you located physically on the South Shore? Yeah,
so I work out of Zenith Physio Pilates, which is just on the edge of Mahone Bay. So it's 25 Keddy Bridge Road. And then the website is FionaLeckenby.com. And I also offer, for people who are curious about working, I offer a free intro meeting that can be really nice for people just to kind of check it out and see, is this going to feel right? So yeah, just here part of enjoying being part of this community. And yeah, I'm available and excited to work with people who feel like this might be speaking to them. Yeah.
And that sounds like enormously helpful as well.
Just connecting to your energy just is calming. So thank you so much.
I've enjoyed it. Thanks for this conversation.
Nice way to start the weekend.
So friends, check out Fiona. We will post all the information about how to get in touch with her. And you can always get in touch with us if you've got questions about anything. So, all right. Thank you so much for your time, Fiona.
Thank you. Thanks for the conversation. Enjoyed it.
We'll see you again soon, hopefully.
Bye.
Bye.